Coral reefs are some of the most diverse ecosystems in the world. This biome is a home to tens of thousands of marine species. About one-third of all marine fish species live part of their lives on coral reefs. One cool fact about coral reefs are that they cover less than 0.2 of the world's oceans, but contain 25% of the world's marine fish species. Coral reefs are located around more than 100 countries around the world. Most reefs are between the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, in the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, the Caribbean Sea, the Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf. Worldwide, coral reefs cover an estimated amount of 110,000 square miles. The Great Barrier Reef is one of the 7 wonders of the natural world. It is larger than the Great Wall of China, and it is the only living thing on Earth visible from space. The Great Barrier Reef extends 2,000 kilometers along Queensland coast and is a globally outstanding example of an ecosystem that has evolved over a long period of time. Within the Great Barrier Reef, there are about 2,500 individual reefs of varying sizes and shapes, and over 900 islands ranging from small, sandy cays and larger vegetated cays to large, rugged continental islands rising. Collectively, these seascapes are some of the most spectacular scenery in the world. Light level is an important factor in aquatic ecosystems. Light is needed by plants for photosynthesis, the process where plants turn light into energy. At any time, the average water temperature cannot be less than about 64 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. For this reason, tropical coral reefs are generally found between 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south of the equator. Corals are found across the world's ocean in both shallow and deep water. But reef-building corals are only found in shallow tropical and subtropical waters. This is because the algae found in their tissues need light for photosynthesis, and they prefer water temperatures between 70 degrees to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Waves, or water movements, are an abiotic factor that helps take away waste and bring food. Salinity is an important aspect for coral reefs to survive and thrive. Corals tend to live in salty water. They survive in a range of 27 to 40 parts per thousand, although specifically preferring 36 parts per thousand. In order to collect the sunlight needed for photosynthesis, plants in coral reefs have larger cells. Plants have also created many symbiotic relationships with other animals in order to survive. Seagrasses live in between the coral reefs, and they transfer nutrients to the coral. Their roots are adapted to keep the plant in place during strong ocean currents. When the seagrass dies, it helps to create future plant growth. Mangroves grow behind the coral reefs. They grow above the seawater, and their roots protect from the sediment overpowering the coral. Most corals have developed a symbiotic relationship with a small microalgae called zooxanthellae. This small dinoflagellate is incorporated in the coral tissue and actually is what gives coral their beautiful colors. As other algae, the zooxanthellae uses sunlight to photosynthesize and produce so much energy that it can also provide the coral with almost all of its energy needed. Scientists have found that about 98% of all energy may come from the zooxanthellae. In return, the algae can take up nutrient-rich waste products from the coral. Because of this symbolic relationship, corals can only grow relatively close to the surface, where the water is clear enough for zooxanthellae to perform photosynthesis. Autotrophs, such as phytoplankton, algae, and seaweed, serve as a major plant life and primary producers in the reef. These plants convert the sun's light to energy for food and serve as food for primary consumers. Sharks are a keystone species in coral reefs. They are at the top of the food chain. With being the top-down regulation in the ocean, without sharks, carnivorous fish increase, decreasing herbivorous parrotfish upon which they feed, increasing algae, which outcompete corals in the absence of herbivory. Pufferfish are omnivorous animals and eat a variety of plants and animals. Pufferfish mainly feed on the algae that grows on the rocks and coral, and also the invertebrates that inhabit these areas. Large species of pufferfish will also eat shellfish such as shrimp and crabs and mollusks. The sea turtles that inhabit the coral reefs include the green turtle, loggerhead turtle, hawksbill turtle, flatback turtle, leatherback turtle, and the Pacific ridley turtle. Some sea turtle species, such as the green turtle, nest on coral caves. When not nesting, these sea turtle species use the water of the reef as foraging grounds. Dugongs are peacefully giants that consume prodigious quantities of seagrasses, and were the most prolific herbivores in coral reefs prior to recent levels of human interference with these ecosystems. Over the last 2 or 3 centuries, however, extensive hunting, habit loss, and coastal pollution have contributed to the rapid declimation of these animals. It is feared that they may soon become extinct. Decomposers break down dead biological matter and waste products and convert them into usable energy, and return important materials to the environment. Decomposers are particularly important in coral reef environments considering the heavy bioload. The main decomposer in the coral reefs are bacteria. Scavengers play a similar role in recycling dead or waste material. Sea cucumbers and some species of snails, crabs, and bristleworms consume dead organisms and are decaying plant and animal matter. Clownfish are scavengers whose feeding habits are plankton picking, which means they visually seek and eat individual zooplankton and phytoplankton floating in the water. Clownfish also likely eat algae from the reef surface. Because of the protection afforded by them by their host anemones, common clownfish have few predators, but they are at risk of predation when they leave the anemone to feed on. Like most sea cucumbers, the edible sea cucumber is a scavenger. It crawls along soft bottoms near coral reefs and seagrass beds, ingesting sand and mud in its path. It separates out and digests any plant or animal matter and passes the sand, leaving a trail of clean sand behind them. Coral reefs are some of the richest but also most threatened ecosystems in the world. Unlike previous mass extinctions, the current one is mostly due to human actions. The death of zooxanthellae algae is becoming more apparent and frequent. This may not sound like a big deal, as a view of algae is seen as a pest in ponds and lakes, but it is capable to remove a key level of the coral ecosystem. Coral reef systems are under increasing pressure, and the threats are primarily from human interactions. In some cases, natural disturbances further compound the effects of anthropogenic stress. Out of the approximately amount of coral reefs worldwide, it is estimated that about 10% have already been degraded beyond recovery, and another 30% are likely to decline significantly within the next 20 years. The overexploitation of reef resources, excessive domestic and agriculture pollutions, and poor land use practices are what lessen the amount of coral reefs' life. Working with people around the world, the Coral Reef Alliance protects our most valuable and threatened ecosystem, coral reefs. The program was established in 2000 by the Coral Reef Conservation Act to protect, conserve, and restore the nation's coral reefs by maintaining healthy ecosystem function. NOAA focus on impacts from the top 3 recognized global threats to coral reefs: climate change, land-based sources of pollution, and unsustainable fishing practices. Healthy coral reefs have rough surfaces and complex structures that dissipate much of the force of incoming waves. This buffers shorelines from currents, waves, and storms, helping to prevent loss of life, property damage, and erosion. Coastline protection by reefs are more stable in terms of erosion and are also a source of sand in natural beach replenishment. Also, tourism and recreation have statistics that every year millions of scuba divers and snorkelers visit coral reefs to enjoy their abundant sea life. Even more tourists visit the beaches protected by these reefs. Local economies receive billions of dollars from these visitors to reef regions through diving tours, recreational fishing trips, hotels, restaurants, and other businesses based near reef ecosystems. Here is a video which will explain what are coral reefs and what is their purpose.
Coral reefs are like the rainforests of the sea, and like those here on land, they're being destroyed. But why should you care? Howdy, friends under the sea, and not. Trace here for D-News. When you picture coral, you probably see it like this, right? But coral aren't just colorful rocks. Tiny living things live in there. Those rocks are actually the skeletons of polyps, which look like this. Polyps constantly secrete calcium carbonate to build these protective skeletons. This is why people say that coral reefs are living. Not because the calcium structures are alive, but because the polyps live inside those little structures, like a turtle in a shell, only popping out to feed or occasionally to fight with one another. Coral are related to jellyfish and sea anemones and are not mobile animals. Instead, they anchor and they live their whole lives in one place. Polyps can be as small as the head of a pin or as large as a foot across, and while some grow in groups, others are solitary. The varied colors in their bodies come from symbiotic algae that live inside of the polyps. As they grow and die, more coral will grow on top of them. And over millions of years, coral pile together to form giant coral reefs that create the basis for 25% of all ocean life, even though they're only 0.1% of the area of the ocean. Again, rainforest of the sea. Get it? Coral appeared in the fossil record 400 million years ago. As the polyps grew through their life cycle, the calcium carbonate they secreted would sometimes merge with secretions of other polyps around them. They do that still. It forms shapes like tables or pillars or spiral wires or staghorns or brain coral. They're all rigid structures with living polyps, but they live in different places and require different conditions. These shapes are affected by the weather, currents, and of course human and large animal activity. When coral like this band together, they're called reef-building coral, and they form some of the most diverse ecosystems on our planet. If you're like me, then you grew up hearing that the reefs were important, but I was never sure why. After researching, though, I get it. I could list all of the animals living in a coral reef in this episode, but it would never end. There are literally millions of species that subsist in, on, and around coral reefs. These structures have been around for millions of years, so it's safe to say there are likely fish, crustaceans, and algae that evolved to live on those reefs and nowhere else, just like insects, mammals, and birds in the Amazon. It's mind-boggling. And that's not all they do. Coral also control how much carbon dioxide is in the ocean. They take the carbon dioxide out of the water, and they use it to build their calcium carbonate skeletons. Without coral, the amount of CO2 in the water would affect the whole planet, but luckily they trap it in stone for us all. And if housing species looking awesome and saving the planet wasn't enough, coral reefs alter how the ocean affects us on the shore. The reefs build up over millions of years and can survive in warm, shallow water as well as colder, deeper water. Reefs can span massive areas and undulate like mountain ranges. They build themselves to withstand typhoons, hurricanes, and other tropical storms, and therefore buffer the shore against those wave storms and floods. These tiny animals evolved long before we did, and their existence in areas like Australia and Florida can prevent loss of life, property damage, and erosion by tempering that rushing ocean. Coral has found that we've only got a section of parrotfish.
And here's my website. Thank you.